The governments from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, collectively BRICS countries, established the new development bank with the aim of supporting both public and private projects from its member countries through financial instruments. Although this may already receive multilateral and regional support from financial institutions, the new development bank plans to complement this under the ambition of achieving global growth and development. The BRICS member states were convinced that the establishment of the bank would reflect the close relations among them. Therefore, the decision was taken in 2012 in the 4th BRICS Summit and announced a year later in Durban during the 5th Summit. Defined as a multilateral development bank, it is aimed to be an efficient and results-oriented project that will finance their own emerging economies and hence increase their economic cooperation. In a context where developing economies still face some impediments to address infrastructure gaps and sustainable development needs, the new development bank was established to perform in accordance with three main principles: transparency, agility, and innovation. Its headquarters will be based in Shanghai and the first regional center in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The new development bank had an initial subscribed capital of $50 billion, with each of the 5 members contributing with $10 billion each. For this reason, opposed to the MDBs such as the IMF, the BRIC Bank appears to work on an equal share voting basis, because the voting power of each member shall equal its subscribed share in the capital stock of the bank. As a result, when any member fails to pay, such member shall be unable, for so long such as failure continues, to exercise that percentage of the voting power which corresponds to the percentage with the amount due. Regarding the making decision concerning this bank, all matters have been decided to be resolved by a simple majority of the vote cast. A qualified majority shall be understood as an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the voting power of the members, or in case of a special majority, it shall be understood as an affirmative vote of 4 of the founding members, concurrent with the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the total voting power of the member. However, with respect to the initial authorized capital of $100 billion, this shall be equally distributed among the founding members. The structure of the BRIC Bank, it consists of a broad governors, board of directors, a president, vice president, as decided by the board of governors, and officers and staff that could be considered to be necessary. First, in relation to the president of the bank, this is chosen by the board of governors and it must belong to one of the founding members through rotation, being member of the board of directors.
A particular feature of BRICS Bank is its will to establish local, regional, and global partnerships with many institutions, from prime MDBs, also known as multilateral development banks, to new ones, as well as market participants. It also takes into account emerging economies and developing countries, as much as international organizations or national entities, regardless of being private or public, but in particular with international financial institutions and national development banks. The areas in which BRICS Bank focuses are infrastructure and sustainable development ideas in emerging countries. On one hand, concerning infrastructure, the bank considers that even though there has been economic and social growth for many years now, there are still many deficiencies in infrastructure. Consequently, it endeavors to identify the gaps between needs and funding in order to suppress them inasmuch as to achieve the authentic development. The main plan to do so is by subsidizing projects that give support to this cause in countries belonging to BRICS or others with emerging market economies. On the other hand, sustainable development is still seen by the bank as insufficient and mainly against the environment. For this reason, it focuses on engaging in initiatives that promote growth without forgetting about the environment. The means by which BRICS Bank gives support and fosters these two areas are mainly through funding. The bank gives loans, guarantees, equity participation, and other financial instruments to public as well as private projects, happening within the BRICS countries initially, but also in other low and middle-income countries, which can buy and apply for funding. In addition, the bank is willing to build a knowledge-sharing platform with developing countries to promote a sustainable development, and it also gives technical assistance to projects assisted by the bank, regarding the preparation and implementation of infrastructure, as well as sustainable development projects. Moreover, it gives support to infrastructure at the same time as sustainable development projects that include more than one country. And last but not least, the bank is committed with special funds that tackle the two areas of concern. To achieve this, the bank entrusts itself to long-term investments, as well as to introduce innovative instruments and to reinvent MDBs, since even though the annual resource commitments from MDBs has increased from 45 billion to 100 billion per year, what is needed actually is about $1 trillion per year. Furthermore, the BRICS Bank has its annual report publishment, in which its accounts are reviewed. In addition, also summary statements of the financial position and the profit and loss, which contain the results of its ordinary operations.
The BRICS New Development Bank aims not only at the same fields than the World Bank, but at those of the IMF, with its contingency reserve arrangement aiming at giving additional liquidity to member countries with balance of payments problems. The New Development Bank has the potential to pose a serious challenge to current global economic governance institutions, although not to the core of the global economic system itself. The New Development Bank and several of its characteristics, such as the alleged lack of conditionality or the increased fairness of its voting procedures, may make it more attractive to developing countries. The New Development Bank may also benefit from discontentment with Bretton Woods institutions arising from their policies in the 1960s, 1970s and 1980s, and failures in attempted reform in more recent years. The creation and promotion of the New Development Bank must be understood as a challenge from developing countries against developed ones, and an attempt to bring political influence in line with the economic importance of the BRICS bloc. It is an attempt at actualizing the distribution of power within global economic governance institutions, an attempt at undermining their importance after they have failed to reform. The New Development Bank, though smaller than Bretton Woods institutions, will also be able to challenge them in efficiency. Its projects are more concrete, and thus the results more immediate and measurable than the broad developmental projects of, for instance, the World Bank. Also, its better conditions may make it more appealing than Bretton Woods institutions. With less or no conditionality, the credits of the New Development Bank give more freedom to borrowing countries. Also, the possibility of having greater decision power through more multilaterally oriented share allocations might reduce the funding of middle and low-income countries to the IMF and World Bank. Limiting the possibility of membership to low and middle-income countries supposes a middle ground between global and regional multilateral development banks that may lead to the Global South being much more autonomous.
The New Development Bank can not only lead to a challenge to the economic order as a whole, but might be read as a Chinese challenge to the USA. Clearly, the bank has resemblance to the Bretton Woods system as it is built around a core group of countries, the BRICS, which can never hold less than 55% of the voting power and can veto some decisions, and a leading country among them, China, that has financed 40% of the CRA. As the bank starts to act, the balance of power will further evolve, as some countries, even among the founding ones, are obviously weaker and less developed. Also, some of the features outlined by BRICS agents will have to be tested against reality, as lower than market interest rates will fail to attract private capitals, and soft conditions may lead to investment losses as a result of misallocated funds. Linking sustainable development to incentive would stimulate governments to consider sustainable practice not bureaucratic conventions, but actions linked to better development effects. Therefore, the way in which environmental and social standards are conceived in the international financial model would be reshaped. The New Development Bank is envisioned to infuse new approaches into development practice, and by establishing sustainable development as their main focus, they have built the framework for this. Many distinct stakeholders should be encouraged to take action in this emerging institution, as for example, it is expected to bolster civil society's engagement. We can forget that the countries assembled in this institution account for 40% of the world's population, and their combined GDP is over 25% of the global GDP, despite having only 11% of the votes at the IMF. So, we are in front of an unprecedented event, as the main developing countries have gathered together in the interest of financial cooperation. Despite calling Russia a developing country is not totally rigorous. Yet, it is clear the BRICS countries are aware of their economic and political impact, and they are certainly in a position to challenge the primacy of the existing multilateral development banks, which is quite significant after all. The opportunities for a financial institution that brings together 5 key developing countries are boundless.